Gentrification is a highly controversial issue in the economically booming cities across the country. People will say that gentrification does not help the people already living in the area and does not bring substantial worth to the city. But my claim is that gentrification is beneficial to the overall community. My three supporting points are that gentrification contributes to the overall economy, it leads to better education and school involvement, and can lead to a decrease in crime rates. Just to define gentrification, it is the process of renewal and rebuilding accompanying the influx of middle class or affluent people into deteriorating areas. My first point, gentrification contributes to the overall economy of the community. It generates more property tax revenue. According to an article written by The Economist, as property prices increase, rent goes up. But that also generates more property tax revenue, helping to improve local services. It creates subsidized housing to help the poor continue living in those areas. And a 2008 study of census data found no evidence of displacement in low-income areas, or low-income non-white households in gentrifying neighborhoods. According to an article by Business Insider, in many cities, zoning laws force developers to build subsidized housing for poor as well as pricey pads for well-off newcomers, which means that rising house prices can help create more subsidized housing, not less. It also brings in a diversity of incomes, which also helps the economy. Not only is it helping new and wealthy people come into the neighborhoods, but it also does help the poor living there not lose a place to live. According to Lisa Stevenson, the Vice President of Research for the National Housing Conference, cities do better when there's a diversity of family types. Cities also do better when there's a diversity of incomes. If you want a thriving economy, you need folks of all income levels to work in those jobs. With rents going up and more property tax revenue increasing, we will be able to see that people are well off and people that are poor are able to live in the same area. Instead of seeing segregation between the two social classes, there will be more subsidized housing and two classes will be living in the same place. My second point, that gentrification leads to better education and school involvement, also helps show that gentrification can lead to a better community overall. That parents have a higher education / income level tend to have more involvement with the schools. It also shows that money going into these schools will increase. Areas with parents who have higher education levels usually have a higher income. They tend to have more involvement with the student parent-teacher association and home and school association. This large amount of inputs from the family is one of the main driving factors to the improvement to the schools through fundraising for various educational reasons. Sometimes new schools are built and sometimes old ones are renovated or even shut down. These occurrences are strongly linked to how gentrified the area is. The outcomes of going through proper and higher education leads to a better community overall. The results of education prove to provide people with better jobs. With better jobs, you can spend more revenue, which helps the economy in the long run. My last point is that gentrification can lead to a decrease in crime rates. Middle to upper class home residential spaces typically have lower crime rates. We can expect a general decrease in crime rates due to the fact that statistically, middle to upper income residential spaces typically have lower crime rates. According to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, persons in lower households at or below the federal poverty level, 39.8 per 1,000, had more than double the rate of violent victimization as persons in high-income households, 16.9 per 1,000. Persons in poor households had a higher rate of violence involving a firearm, which is 3.5 out of 1,000, compared to persons above the federal poverty level, which was 0.8 to 2.5 per 1,000. People with higher income levels typically have more political affluence. According to a paper written by Urban Economics, the more affluent people migrating into neighborhoods are, the more likely they'll have political influence and therefore successfully request a heightened police presence. Gentrification, based on my 3 points, that it helps the overall economy, it can lead to better education and school involvement, and can lead to a decrease in crime rates, just shows that gentrification leads to benefiting the community in an overall aspect.
All right, you define the term pretty clearly. The proposition is nicely stated. There is a preview. I thought it was a little bit rushed, but the signposts, when you got to those individual points, are clear, and they are stated like claims, so you're in good shape there. That made it relatively easy to follow. There's generally good background information. I do think that some of the research that you present is perhaps done at a macro level and doesn't necessarily look at particular cases in much detail. And I don't know about the sources on some of those, especially the first couple ones that you cited on that first point. You might want to qualify those sources and suggest that they are, in fact, independent evaluations. It sounds to me like it's developer research that might be presented in that situation or circumstance. On the second point, you had arguments about education levels and such, but I did not hear any source citations for most of the information on the second point. So on the first point, you cited sources pretty well. On the third point, you cited sources pretty well. On the second point, there seemed to be a lot of assumptions, and I think that there's, like I've said to a couple of people before, I think that there's information that you're presenting that is based on research that you've done, but you're not going to get credit for the research if you don't tell us that that's where the information came from. Your conclusions seem to be, intuitive, or what you think is reasonable. If it's an authority who's reached those conclusions, that probably would add a little bit to your credibility on the argument. I thought the presentation was pretty solid. You speak to us for the most part. The summary is also very good. So it sounds like a little bit like I'm rushing too, because we have a lot of speakers to hear from. Thank you.